What would you do if you found out your sister was abandoning her children for a life of luxury? Sarah's peaceful Sunday morning was shattered when her sister Jessica orchestrated a cruel betrayal, leaving Sarah responsible for the twins at the airport. But this was only the beginning. What started as a shocking family drama soon unraveled into a web of deceit, betrayal, and criminal charges. Sarah wasn't just going to let them get away with it. Stay tuned to see how Sarah takes control and fights for the future of her nieces. My channel's struggling, so if you're intrigued, please comment 1 to help me out. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Subscribe to see how it ends, and I wish you all good health. On a Sunday morning, the gentle sunlight streamed through the windows as Sarah Williams sat at her desk, reviewing work documents in her home office. As a senior manager at Boston Consulting Group, quiet mornings on the weekend had become her routine. The comforting aroma of still-warm Dunkin' coffee wafted up from her desk, blending perfectly with the calm atmosphere. While organizing stacks of papers, her eyes drifted to the window. The rosebush she had just bought from Whole Foods yesterday glistened with morning dew. She had finally managed to tend to the garden last weekend, and now the landscape around her house, a place she'd purchased with her parents' help, was starting to look worthy of the effort. There was still some time before service at Trinity Church in Copley Square, but then the peaceful moment was abruptly interrupted by her iPhone's ringing. "Sarah, can you come over today?" It was her sister Jessica. Sarah let out a small sigh, already anticipating her usual imperious tone. "I'm hosting the family for brunch. Mom's coming too. I've ordered catering from Legal Seafoods." An hour later, Sarah found herself at Jessica's mansion. The colonial-style house in Brookline's quiet residential area always commanded an imposing presence, as it had for years. A brand-new Range Rover, the pride and joy of her sister and brother-in-law, was parked in the driveway. "Welcome, Sarah." Her mother, Mary, greeted her with a warm smile, the Tiffany silver necklace swaying gently at her neck. "Jessica's prepared such a lovely brunch. She's really living well since marrying into this family." A part of Sarah's chest tightened at her mother's words. "Auntie Lynn!" The twins, Emma and Olivia, came running up. As Sarah hugged the two girls in their matching Gap Kids dresses, she inwardly sighed. The discomfort she felt whenever visiting her sister's house had only deepened over the years, an ever-growing gap between the life she led and the one her family wanted her to have. Entering the living room, she was met with a modern space that had been designed by a professional interior decorator. The marble dining table was laden with lobster croissant sandwiches and truffle-flavored eggs Benedict, luxurious, indulgent, and exactly what she'd expected. "I'm the star today," since Jessica made her grand entrance, dressed in a new Louis Vuitton dress, striking a pose clearly intended for social media. Her husband, Kevin, was, as always, absorbed in reading news on his iPad. "Actually, I have wonderful plans," Jessica announced, holding a mimosa and Dom Perignon with an air of superiority. "We've decided to take a family trip to Hawaii next month. Kevin's company is doing well, and isn't this the perfect time?" "What? When?" Sarah's surprise was evident in her expression. Jessica flashed a malicious smile, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Surely you're not planning to keep playing the single career woman forever. You need to spend time with family occasionally. When I saw you at Copley Place the other day, you looked exhausted." Sarah felt the sting of Jessica's words, but before she could respond, their mother's voice rang out in a half-hearted attempt to scold, though her attention had already shifted to taking photos of the food for Instagram. "Auntie Lynn, come to Hawaii with us. We're staying at the Disney Hotel in Oahu." The twins' innocent voices echoed in the room. Sarah hesitated for only a moment before making up her mind. She had accumulated miles from a recent business class sale, and, if nothing else, it would give her some space from this world. "Yes, of course. I haven't been to Hawaii in a while." On the table, the twins' iPads were already playing videos of Hawaiian beach resorts. On the morning of departure, Sarah woke up earlier than usual. The clock showed 7 a.m. She double-checked the sunscreen and new swimsuit she'd bought at Walgreens the day before. As she confirmed her reservation on the American Airlines app, the Boston Morning Sun reflected off her MacBook. While munching on a bagel, she recalled Jessica's text message last night. which had only included a final confirmation of boarding time and a casual note saying, "Tomorrow will be a wonderful memory, starting a fun family vacation." Today, though she tried to say it cheerfully to herself, something still nagged at her heart. Checking the time while reviewing photos of the White Hotel she'd looked up on TripAdvisor, Sarah loaded her Toyota RAV4 and drove through Boston streets. The roads, usually congested, were clear on this Saturday morning. The car radio was broadcasting Hawaii's weather forecast. Boston seemed determined to match with its own humid weather. Boston Logan Airport was bustling with travelers. As Sarah wheeled her new carry-on toward the check-in counter, she overheard a family in front of her discussing their Disney vacation package. "Good morning. The 9:45 flight to Honolulu. Your name, please?" "Sarah Williams." Sarah presented her platinum card. The counter agent's expression subtly changed. The sound of keyboard typing paused momentarily. "I'm very sorry, Miss Williams. Your reservation was canceled in the system last night." "What? That's impossible, the confirmation email." "Sithol, the Brown party completed their check-in about 30 minutes ago." Her mind went blank. She frantically pulled out her iPhone 14 Pro and called Jessica. No answer. Kevin's number went straight to voicemail. Just then, a new message notification appeared on her screen. "Take care of the children. We need some time." And then came a photo. The twins sitting on a bench in front of the airport Starbucks. Emma clutching a pink teddy bear from Build-A-Bear. Olivia's cheeks wet with tears, the two holding hands, their expressions filled with anxiety and fear. "Emma! Olivia!" Sarah ran desperately through the airport. Her mind raced with questions. Why would Jessica do this? Were the rumors about Kevin's company true? Why hadn't her mother warned her? "Excuse me, I'm looking for 5-year-old twin girls, blonde, wearing Gap Kids dresses." She rushed toward the food court asking passing airport staff. Messages from Jessica kept arriving on her smartphone. "The children are in your care. The 5 and 29 plan documents are in the safe at home. This is our last chance, Kevin and I." Finally reaching the food court area, she heard a small voice. "Auntie Lynn!" The two were sitting on a bench beside the escalator, in a spot somewhat hidden from view. "It's okay now. I'll protect you." The twins' bodies trembled in her embrace. Massport officials had begun gathering around. "Mama said she'd be right back." Emma's trembling voice left Sarah with nothing to do but hold her tighter. "They said they were going to take the shuttle bus, then Mama and Papa never came back." Olivia's words brought anger to Sarah's eyes. "Ma'am, could we speak with you at the security office?" A man in a Massport uniform quietly approached. His badge gleamed with Logan Airport Police. "We'll get some hot chocolate and cookies for the children." A female staff member smiled kindly at the twins. Her name tag had Student Ambassador Program pinned on. Sarah checked her handbag, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through the series of messages from Jessica. The cold, calculated tone of them made her blood boil. Outside the window, a Boeing 787 bound for Hawaii climbed into the deep blue sky. Her sister and brother-in-law were likely sitting inside, feeling no guilt whatsoever. Sarah's breath hitched as she stared at the sky, the weight of it all pressing down on her. This wasn't the family trip she had envisioned. 12 hours after the incident, an exhausted atmosphere settled over Sarah's living room. They had just returned from the police interviews and meetings with Children's Protective Services. "Emma, Olivia, come here, the bath is ready," Sarah called gently, but the twins stayed huddled together on the sofa, eyes blank, unwilling to move. Scattered crayons and coloring books lay abandoned on the floor, alongside a half-eaten McDonald's Happy Meal. "Auntie Lynn," Emma asked in a small voice, "are Mama and Papa really not coming back?" Sarah's heart clenched in her chest. The police had confirmed that Jessica and Kevin had boarded their flight as scheduled and arrived in Honolulu, their credit card records showing they'd checked into the Hilton Hawaiian Village. "I can't believe it!" Sarah's mother, Mary, had rushed over, apparently leaving a church women's group meeting midway. Her normally immaculate hair was disheveled, as if she hadn't taken a breath since she'd learned what had happened. "That Jessica would do such a thing!" Just then, Sarah's phone rang. It was a detective from the Boston Police Department. "Miss Williams, have you heard any concerning conversations from the children?" Sarah's mind went back to the twins' words at the airport. Yes, Emma mentioned that Mama and Papa were fighting about money, and I believe Olivia. The next morning, after dropping the twins off at the nearby Brookline Public Schools, Sarah headed to Jessica's house. A police search warrant had been issued, and she was permitted to accompany them. A uniformed officer led the way as they climbed the stairs to the second-floor study. "Take a look at this," the officer said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of the discovery. Drawers were filled with masses of documents, piles of unpaid bills, credit card statements, and financial documents from Kevin's company. The rumors of the company's financial troubles in the Boston Globe were true. "This is," Sarah gasped, unable to believe her eyes when she saw the Fidelity account statement. The 529 plan set up for the twins' education had been reduced to just $1. Over $500,000 in funds had been withdrawn in the past 3 months. As they searched further, Sarah's heart sank. The closet was filled with box after box of Hermes, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton items, still with the price tags attached. Jessica's Instagram was a curated display of a perfect family life, but behind that facade, she had been draining the twins' future. "Sarah, there's this too," the officer said, handing her a torn envelope. Inside were bank statements from the Cayman Islands. "Miss Williams?" the detective called, his voice tinged with shock. "We've found significant transfer records under your mother, Mary's name." Just then, Sarah's smartphone vibrated in her hand. It was a message from Trinity Church. "Sarah, something terrible has happened," her mother's strained voice crackled through the speaker. "Jessica took the women's group fees and used my name." As it turned out, Jessica had also been the treasurer for the church women's group. There was now a high possibility of fraud involved there, too. She had been embezzling membership fees and using Mary's name to cover her tracks. This was no accident. This had been completely premeditated, Sarah realized. She turned to the police, her voice steady but with an edge of finality. "I told you this was all planned." Hours later, Sarah sat in her living room, compiling all the evidence. Her mother was being interviewed at the church, and the twins were safely attending their after-school program. The Boston Police Department detective called again. "We've discovered something significant. It appears they had no intention of returning to the mainland." Sarah caught her breath. "What do you mean?" "We found one-way ticket reservations to the Caribbean." That night, Sarah had made up her mind. Spread across her dining table were reports for the police, FBI, Child Protective Services, and Sarah Cohen, one of the nation's top child abandonment attorneys. "Auntie Lynn!" Olivia's voice came from upstairs. "Can we go to school tomorrow, too?" "Of course." Sarah smiled at the twins. "Life will continue as normal, I promise." Opening her MacBook, Sarah sent the final report to the police. Attached were Jessica's Instagram posts portraying the perfect mother, photos of the airport abandonment, and records of all financial transactions. She was determined to fight to protect her precious family. "Today, the FBI has joined the investigation as a serious child abandonment case." The detective's final words strengthened Sarah's resolve even further. Outside the window, Boston's nightscape glowed quietly. On the table lay the twins' craft project from after-school care. "To our beloved Auntie Lynn." Looking at those words, Sarah heaved a deep sigh. Early morning, 1 week after the incident. At the top floor of the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Oahu, Jessica was enjoying her morning coffee on the balcony, looking down at the azure sea. She was selecting photos to post on Instagram. "Jessica, we need to talk." Kevin approached with a tense expression, clutching his iPad. "About the company." "Everyone?" Just then, a knock echoed at the suite door. When they opened it, more than 10 law enforcement officers stood there. An FBI agent began reading their rights. Outside the window, an ABC News helicopter circled. "I have nothing to say. Let me call my lawyer." Jessica maintained her elegant demeanor until the end. However, tickets to the Cayman Islands were found in her Louis Vuitton bag. "This is a federal crime." The agent's voice was cold. "You're charged with interstate child abandonment, embezzlement, and money laundering." 2 weeks later, at the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, Sarah was meeting with prosecutors. "Miss Williams, we have sufficient evidence," said Jessica Morris, a prosecutor with over 20 years of experience. Particularly, the misappropriation of education funds will decisively turn the jury against them. The conference room table was piled with evidence, starting with Logan Airport security camera footage, church women's group accounting records, documents showing fraudulent accounting at Kevin's company. Additionally, there was Jessica's history of false social media posts, detailed psychological diagnoses from the twins' counselor as decisive evidence. There were records of fraudulent withdrawals from the Fidelity 529 plan and multiple financial transaction documents with forged signatures from Mother Mary. The prosecution, Morrison continued, will charge them primarily with federal child abandonment violations, adding fraud charges for misuse of education funds and embezzlement for misappropriation of church funds. Will also include charges of document forgery for forging the mother's signature, money laundering related to the Cayman Islands accounts, and conspiracy charges for the couple's plan scheme. The sentence? Sarah asked. Maximum 20 years for Jessica, Morrison answered sternly. For Kevin, 7 to 15 years, depending on his level of cooperation. That evening, Sarah took the twins to their psychological counseling session at Boston Children's Hospital. The children's recovery will take time, explained Dr. Sarah Watson, their physician. Particularly, abandonment by a mother creates deep emotional wounds. 1 month later, at the Suffolk County Courthouse, Jessica and Kevin's initial hearing began. Local media packed the gallery, and the Boston Globe featured the case on its front page. Defendants, please rise, the judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Jessica wore an orange prison jumpsuit. Her former arrogant demeanor had vanished, and her makeup-free face showed fatigue. Jessica, began. The courtroom fell silent. I admit to everything. Her confession began. At first, when I learned about Kevin's company's critical situation, Jessica's voice trembled. But that's no excuse. I abandoned my children. Her testimony lasted 3 hours. It all started, she said with her pride as a mama influencer, misappropriating education funds to maintain a luxurious lifestyle, embezzling church funds to cover debt payments, forging her mother's signature for new loans, and finally the escape plan for a new life in the Caribbean. She admitted that at the root of it all was her hatred for Sarah's stable life. Kevin, who took the stand next, admitted to everything. The company had been essentially bankrupt for 2 years. His voice was hollow. But I couldn't tell Jessica her lifestyle. Mary took the witness stand as the prosecution's final witness. I trusted my eldest daughter too much. Her voice was filled with remorse. I betrayed the church members, hurt Sarah, and most of all, my grandchildren. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was filled with tension. Defendant Jessica Brown, the judge's voice resonated. Your actions represent the gravest breach of trust. You abandoned your children, betrayed your family's trust, and even deceived your church community. After the sentencing, a press conference was held on the courthouse steps. This is certainly not a result to be proud of. Sarah spoke quietly into the microphones. But justice has been served. Most importantly, the children's future has been protected. At dusk in Boston, Sarah and the twins walked through Boston Common. Auntie Lynn, Emma called out softly, we'll always be together, right? Yes, of course. Sarah squeezed the twins' hands firmly. We'll walk forward as a new family. 2 weeks after the sentencing in the visiting room of Massachusetts Women's Correctional Institution, Sarah momentarily faltered at the sight of her sister sitting behind the reinforced glass. Jessica, in her orange prison uniform, had completely lost her former glamour. Her skin, once polished with Brandon skincare products, was ashen, and her perfectly maintained blonde hair was thin and damaged from prison-issue shampoo. Sarah? Jessica's voice was hoarse. I did something unforgivable. Yes, Sarah answered quietly. She had wrestled with the decision to visit many times, but this might be their last face-to-face meeting. This visit was necessary to understand everything and to settle something within herself. How are the children? Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. They don't want to see me. Yes, I think that's best for now. Sarah recalled the counselor's advice. The children's emotional recovery would take time. The clock in the visiting room ticked softly, its rhythm the only sound in the otherwise still air. A brief 15-minute visit. During this time, the two sisters, Jessica and Sarah, sat across from each other, reflecting on their lives, their shared childhood, and the family they had grown up in. Jessica, the one who had borne all of their mother's expectations, and Sarah, who had always remained in the shadows like a wallflower, quietly observing from the sidelines. "Remember when we were little in the Back Bay house?" Jessica's voice trailed off, her words laden with nostalgia. "If only we could go back to those days." Sarah stared out the window, the faint autumn chill starting to make its presence known, but her thoughts lingered on the future. The first steps of her new life were already unfolding, and for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. On her walk home through Boston Common, the crisp air brushed against her face as she reflected on the changes awaiting her. At home, things were different now. The former guest room had been transformed into a bright, welcoming children's bedroom. Matching beds from Pottery Barn, cheerful bookshelves from IKEA, and colorful curtains from Target's Cat and Jack collection had all been carefully chosen to make the space feel like home for the twins. "Auntie Lynn, is this room really ours?" Emma asked, her face full of disbelief as she gazed at the new surroundings. "Can we stay here forever?" "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with tenderness as she hugged the twins. The adoption proceedings were moving smoothly, and the court had supported the decision to place the children with their biological aunt. It felt right, finally. The children had a home where they would feel safe, loved, and cherished. At work, things were changing too. Boston Consulting Group had been understanding of Sarah's situation, allowing her to utilize flexible hours and occasionally work from home. A new position was even being discussed. Unexpected support had appeared from those around her. Jennifer, a single mother living nearby, had offered to help with after-school pickups and drop-offs. The Trinity Church community delivered home-cooked meals, and the counselor at Brookline Public Schools had taken special care in addressing the twins' emotional needs. "Time will heal some things," Mother Mary had said to Sarah one afternoon, her voice steady and comforting. She too was changing. Through her volunteer work at the church, it seemed as though she had awoken to new values. Now, on weekends, she would bake cookies with the twins, sharing moments of warmth and connection. A year later, in early summer, the twins celebrated their 6th birthday in Sarah's backyard. The sweet smell of organic cake from Whole Foods and homemade lemonade filled the air. Laughter from the neighborhood children danced around them, creating a simple yet heartwarming scene. "Happy birthday, Emma and Olivia!" Their classmates cheered as the twins beamed with happiness, their once anxious faces now radiating pure joy. The weight of their past fears seemed to have melted away. That night, after putting the children to bed, Sarah stepped out into the garden. The starry sky above was a quiet canvas, and as she stood there, a soft smile crept across her face. On the table inside, the twins' essays lay untouched. The theme was my family, and they began with the words, "To my beloved mom," a simple phrase that carried the weight of their genuine love and feelings. In the prison where Jessica was serving her sentence, reports said she was earnestly working on rehabilitation programs. Kevin, in a separate facility, was also serving his sentence, and their divorce had already been finalized. Letters from them occasionally arrived for the twins, but Sarah kept them unopened, waiting for the day when the children would be ready to read them on their own terms. In Sarah's desk drawer was a dinner invitation from a rising pediatrician in Boston. It had started with the twins' regular checkups. His gentle gaze and thoughtful care for the children had kindled a small warmth in Sarah's heart, and she had allowed herself to wonder what might come next. On Christmas night, a large tree sparkled in Sarah's living room, and 3 stockings hung above the fireplace in the corner. Sheet music for the twins' lessons lay on top of their new piano, and the words, "Love you, Mom," written by Emma and Olivia before they fell asleep, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered softly. Outside, snow had begun falling quietly, blanketing the world in a fresh, white layer. It felt like the beginning of something new. A new chapter in their story, one of healing, love, and the promise of a bright future. What do you do when the family you've always known betrays you in the worst possible way? Do you let them walk all over you, or do you rise up and protect the people who truly matter? Sarah was no stranger to the judgment and superiority of her sister Jessica and the rest of her family. But when Jessica's actions went too far, leaving the twins abandoned at the airport, Sarah had no choice but to act. The entire situation, the manipulation, the lies, the betrayal, was enough to push anyone to their breaking point. But Sarah didn't break. She stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, her nieces. By gathering all the evidence and working closely with authorities, Sarah took control of the situation and exposed Jessica's lies. She didn't let her sister's perfect Instagram facade fool her any longer. The twins deserved better, and Sarah was determined to give them the safe, loving home they had always needed. The journey wasn't easy. Sarah had to fight for her family every step of the way, but in the end, she triumphed. She not only saved her nieces from the turmoil their parents had caused, but also gave them a future full of love and stability. As the twins' laughter filled the air during their birthday celebration, Sarah realized that despite everything, she had won. So, what would you do in Sarah's place? Would you have fought for your family even if it meant standing up against your own blood? Let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories of strength and resilience.
I should have known something was terribly wrong the moment I heard Clara's muffled voice through the door that day. It started like any other Saturday morning. I was pottering around the kitchen, enjoying a rare moment of quiet solitude before the rest of the house stirred to life. The clinking of ceramic on the countertop as I prepared my usual morning tea was the only sound, until Clara's urgent whispers broke the stillness. At first, I thought maybe she was on the phone with a friend, keeping her voice hushed so as not to wake Ethan. But as I paused to listen, the harsh, conspiratorial tone set me on edge. There was no warmth, no laughter in her clipped words, just a forceful intensity that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. "Handled soon, before he gets suspicious," she hissed, her consonants sharp like icy needles. "Just make sure you're ready to move when I give the signal." My heart stammered in my chest as the implication of her words sank in like a stone to the pit of my stomach. She was plotting something deceitful, something aimed at hurting my Ethan. Of that, I had no doubt. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law, Clara, collapsed around me. Gone were the innocent smiles, the loving embraces she showered my only son with whenever I came to visit. Just one short, overheard conversation, and the woman I trusted with my family's happiness was suddenly a viper, poised to strike at our very hearts. How long had this malicious deceit been going on under my nose? What fresh hell was she concocting against my beloved boy, her own husband? 1,000 frantic thoughts whirled like a cyclone as fury and disbelief warred within me. I wanted to burst through that door right there and demand the truth. To grab Clara by her slender shoulders and shake it out of her until she spilled every last treacherous secret. But something held me back, a fleeting wisdom warning me not to expose my hand until I knew what game she was playing. For all my motherly instincts screamed at me to protect my child, I realized the smart play was to bide my time and lay in wait, to gather what evidence I could of her betrayal before raising the alarm, at least until I better understood the viper's nest I had unwittingly welcomed into my family. So I forced myself to retreat from that closed door, clutching the certainty of Clara's deception like a parcel of powdered glass. However sharp and wounding the truth, I knew it was the only way I could finally excise her lies from our lives for good. No matter what deep treachery she was spinning, I would not allow that deceitful snake to sink her fangs into my loved ones and inject her venom. If it was war Clara wanted, a war for the very soul of this family, then she just enlisted herself a determined enemy who would show no mercy in defending her kin. Our happy American dream of generations was suddenly hardening into a battlefield of looming familial crisis. But in that moment, I took a pained breath and soldiered on. For Ethan's sake, and for the sake of unraveling the dark truth before it ruined us all. I knew I needed concrete evidence of Clara's betrayal before confronting her. Over the next few days, I kept a close watch, paying attention to every hushed phone call and suspicious glance. The innocent facade she put on around Ethan only stoked my simmering fury. Finally, the break I was waiting for came when Clara left her laptop unattended in the living room one afternoon. A huge risk, considering what incriminating trails may be lurking in her digital footprints. I wasted no time seizing the opportunity to uncover the truth. With shaking hands, I lifted the laptop's lid, dreading what I might find, and that's when I saw it. The email correspondence laid bare like a ransacked tomb, her lurid sexts and explicit photos shared with not just one, but several men I didn't recognize. I felt physically ill, my stomach roiling as the full extent of her infidelity condensed into an inescapable reality. But even worse were the paper trails indicating her intentions to siphon money from Ethan's inheritance after taking out a secret life insurance policy. My hands went clammy, the laptop almost slipping from my grip. I couldn't process the malice, the sheer calculating greed she'd been operating with literally under our roof. This was so far beyond a simple tawdry affair. She was aiming to hollow out my son's life like a carved pumpkin and devour the leftover scraps. I don't know how long I sat there, tears of rage streaking down my cheeks as more and more damning evidence piled up on the screen. But eventually, the sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. I quickly closed the laptop, straightening myself up just as Clara emerged from the hallway. "Oh, good afternoon, Marlene," she chirped with that saccharine smile that turned my stomach. "Is everything okay?" I stared back at her, struggling to mask the disgust seething behind my eyes. She looked so unbearably smug, not an inkling of guilt over the depraved acts she'd been carrying out. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to grab her by her pretty, lying mouth and, no, I couldn't give in to that impulse, as satisfying as it may be. Not without irrefutable proof to back me up when the inevitable denials came. Steadying my nerves, I forced the most level tone I could manage. "Clara, we need to talk about what I found on your computer just now." Her eyes went wide, those loathsome lips parting in a small O as the implication sank in. But just as quickly, her expression contorted into a sneer. "How dare you go through my private things, you nosy old bat," she spat, all hints of sweetness evaporating like mist. "What, did Ethan put you up to this, trying to pin something on me so you can cry victim?" I recoiled at her venom, appalled at how quickly she went on the attack. But that contemptible, transparent attempt at reversal only strengthened my resolve. I would not be cowed by this vicious succubus a moment longer. "Don't insult my intelligence with your lies, you faithless snake," I shot back, feeling the words ripping up from my gut. "I saw everything on there, the texts, the videos, the policy info. You're nothing but a calculating, money-grubbing whore trying to bleed my family dry." Her mask shattered then, giving way to an expression of pure, glowering hatred. This was the real Clara, the soulless harpy hiding beneath cheap cosmetics and vapid smiles. As she opened her mouth to surely spew more venom in her sad defense, I held up a hand to silence her. "Save your pathetic denials. We're done here, you and I. One way or another, I'm going to make sure Ethan sees your worthless soul for what it truly is. Your grip on this family is slipping, you treacherous snake, and I'll spend every last breath ensuring you slither back to the gutter you came from." With that vow lingering in the air like a prophecy, I turned on my heel and stormed out, leaving her to stew in the putrid mess of her own making. She'd been unmasked, her decade-long charade shattered beyond repair. From here on out, it was scorched earth. Or so, help me, Clara would rue the day she dared make an enemy of this mother's wrath. After my explosive showdown with Clara, I knew I needed to make my next moves very carefully. As much as I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops and watch her world burn, a small voice of reason warned me to be strategic. I had the proof of her deceit, but would it be enough to convince Ethan? Sitting alone in my bedroom that night, the weight of it all felt crushing. How could I get through to my son, make him see the vile beast wearing his wife's skin? I didn't have the luxury of subjecting him to the graphic evidence. That venom could scar him forever. There had to be another way to peel back the scales from his eyes. That's when the phone rang, the caller ID displaying a name I wasn't expecting. "Derek, everything okay over there?" My brother-in-law's gruff voice crackled over the line. "You've been awfully quiet the last few days." In that moment, it was like the universe was presenting me with an ally, someone to help shoulder this burden. Fighting back tears, I quickly unloaded everything to Derek. The overheard conversation, the emails, the videos, all of Clara's sordid transgressions laid out. There was a long pause before he finally responded, rage simmering in his tone, that godless little harlot. We spent the next few hours strategizing, knowing we needed an airtight case to make Ethan a true believer. As much as it killed me, Derek warned that simply dumping the evidence on him could push Clara to retaliate, try to manipulate the narrative her way. We need to bait her into slipping up, get her nefarious plans on record, so that Snake has nowhere left to wiggle, he said, his words like arcs of electricity reigniting my dwindling resolve. With his help, I began meticulously documenting Clara's daily activities, taking screenshots of her shadier behavior and cataloging every incident that reeked of deception. We'd get that hellspawn to show her true ugly colors eventually, and by God, Ethan would bear witness. And we had an ally in a very unlikely place, Derek's own daughter Lena, my sweet, mild-mannered niece. When I finally confided the truth to her, the blaze that erupted in her eyes was stunning, almost feral. "That backstabbing bitch has violated the sanctity of this family," she hissed, more venom than I'd ever heard from her gentle lips. "Count me in to help take her down. I won't let that whore get away with this." With Lena joining the cause, the chink in Clara's facade finally began to show ever so slightly. My niece took great delight in concocting subtle ways to shake that wretched harpy's confidence, keeping her always just a bit off-kilter and paranoid, knowing we lurked around the corner. Every sidelong glance, every bitten lip and shift of the eyes when we'd suddenly appear, felt like a delicious victory. Clara was the trapped rat for a change, her beady eyes darting around as the jaws of ruination began closing in. Just a bit longer, and she'd slip up spectacularly. Gone were any hesitations about ruthlessly exposing this schemer's depravity. With Derek and Lena by my side, I knew I had the family's full might aligned against Clara's sadistic machinations. For months, that godless vulture had been feeding on our love, our trust, but now the predator was about to become the prey. Whichever hole Clara thought she could slither out of this through, we would seal it shut, without mercy. Her despicable reign of betrayal was nearing its inevitable, fiery end. And as the splinter of loved ones committed to her demise, we would ensure the inferno that consumed her left no secrets remaining. With Derek and Lena fully committed to our cause, we knew the key was to bait Clara into revealing the full extent of her nefarious intentions. Simply confronting her again would only cause her to lash out with more denials and manipulations. No, this venomous serpent needed to be flushed completely into the open. Our best shot was to dangle something irresistible in front of her greedy snout, an opportunity she couldn't refuse to take advantage of and swindle from Ethan. Derek had the perfect scheme, one that made my stomach churn with guilt, but was ultimately necessary for the sting operation. We set up an investment plan, make it look incredibly lucrative. He explained in hushed tones over coffee one morning. Give Clara all the breadcrumbs to sniff out, passwords, financial details, everything she needs. You want us to tempt her? I shook my head slowly. Deceiving her is one thing, but concocting an entire fabrication feels like we're stooping to her level of moral bankruptcy? Lena interjected, eyes blazing with determination. That's exactly the point, Aunt Marlene. We can't play by the rules with someone as unscrupulous as that two-faced gutter rat. We lay the perfect trap to make her true nature inescapable. As much as it turned my stomach, I knew they were right. Clara had declared war on our family a long time ago. Our mutually assured destruction was the only path to excising her malignancy for good. Okay, I relented with a weary sigh. If this is what it takes to rid us of that toxic succubus, let's do it. What's the play? Over the next few weeks, we carefully constructed an airtight honeypot tailored to appeal precisely to Clara's insatiable greed and blatant disregard for ethics. A too-good-to-be-true investment vehicle with documents and financials readied, just waiting for her thieving tendrils to start slithering all over it. Derek and I played the parts of bumbling family members, feigning confusion over these perplexing investments as Clara's eyes gleamed with avarice. It made me want to vomit, watching her perfectly conceal the ravenous glee behind that vapid beauty queen smirk as the trap was set. You know, these financials seem complicated, Derek said one afternoon as we discussed the details over lunch. I really could use someone smarter with this kind of thing to take a look. Like piranha scenting blood in the water, Clara's whole demeanor shifted, her carefully practiced look of concern barely masking the predatory hunger in her dark eyes. "Oh, Derek, you know I'm always happy to help out however I can with this sort of thing," she chirped in that saccharine lilt that made my molars grind. "Why don't you pass those documents along and I'll take a look this evening? No pressure at all, but I'd hate to see an opportunity slip through the cracks." The dewy-eyed look of faux innocence she shot my way caused a flare of anger to surge through me. That forked tongue might as well be lashing out between her deceitful lips. But I bit back the venom welling up, forcing myself to play along. "Are you sure, dear? I feel just awful piling more on your plate." "Absolutely. Think nothing of it." The raptor gave a disarming chuckle, waving away my faux concern with perfectly manicured talons. "It'll be my pleasure to lend my expertise. I'll go over each and every detail to make sure we don't miss a single lucrative window." I caught the briefest of looks between Lena and Derek, then a momentary flicker of disgust at the shameless deceit saturating Clara's every word. But we all remained steadfast, treading carefully as the viper began uncoiling itself around our tempting lure. "Thank you so much, dear. I can always count on you to look out for this family's best interests," I said, forcing the most warm, grandmotherly tone I could muster as the muscles in my jaw clenched. Whether Clara believed the sincerity in my voice or not, she simply offered one of her plastic smiles in return, already lost in the first visions of her duplicitous plundering. Like capturing a venomous serpent, we held our breath, waiting for her to fully slither into the trap's confines. The first phase was complete. Now all that remained was springing it shut, sinking our fangs into the very heart of this deception before ripping Clara's facade to shreds once and for all. With Clara thoroughly ensnared by the bait we'd laid out, all that remained was to reel her in for the ultimate undoing. Anticipation coursed through me with every concealed glance I caught of her poring over the fabricated investment details. The arrogant smirk curling her lips told me everything. This was the moment she'd burn her last credible mask to ashes. The plan was for Lena to take the lead, playing the role of naive accomplice to draw Clara's full corruptive forces into the open. As the youngest of us, she could most easily appeal to that Black Widow's sense of overconfidence and make her slip up fatally. "I just don't quite understand these prospectus forms," Lena said with perfectly feigned confusion one evening as Clara leaned over the documents. "It all seems so complicated, definitely more than I'm equipped to handle." That was Derek's cue to make an overly theatrical show of heading out. "Well, if you bright ladies have it covered, I'll leave you to it. Marlene and I actually have an appointment to get going to." "Yes, we really must get moving," I added with a pointed look towards my traitorous daughter-in-law. "You don't mind keeping an eye on things here for a while, do you, Clara dear?" The she-devil looked up from the papers with a smile so calculated it could have been printer-generated. "Of course. I'd be simply delighted to walk Lena through all the finer points." And with that, Derek and I made our exit, leaving the trap ready to be sprung. I had to hand it to my niece. Lena played the role of helpless ingenue flawlessly, as Clara huffed and puffed through lengthy explanations, deliciously unaware of the noose tightening around her with every word. Sequestered away and monitoring the audio-video feed, I fought to keep my fury in check as Clara's contemptuous mask slipped fully away. The condescending laughter, the flagrant insults about our collective intelligence. It was like she simply couldn't resist the urge to revel in her own smug superiority. "I swear, you poor dear, it's a miracle you're not institutionalized with how little you understand," she gloated with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. "Thank goodness you'll have me around to handle matters like these. Lord knows your idiot family would bungle it into bankruptcy before the first quarter's figures even hit." Lena recoiled with a perfectly delivered flinch, suckering Clara into brazenly continuing her torrent of bile. "Seriously, why do you think I've stuck around playing dutiful wife to that dullard Ethan all these years? Certainly not for his rapturous skills in the bedroom, I can tell you that." Her derisive cackle pierced the airwaves, the sound of rancid nails on chalkboard scraping against my very soul. Mercifully, Lena allowed only the faintest look of shock to cross her features in response. "Well, you always did seem to dote on him so supportively," she managed to stammer through expertly feigned distress. "Does that mean you've been faking it all along?" In an instant, Clara's expression went predatory, like a shark scenting chum in the water as she leaned in conspiratorially close. "Fake it?" she hissed with sneering contempt. "Oh, honey, I've been meticulously planning this family's demise since before I even met that sad sack of a husband." With those damning words vocalized, the final hook was baited. I watched in speechless revulsion as Clara enthusiastically divulged every last lurid detail of her machinations, the ulterior motives behind their marriage, the mistress arrangements with her lovers, the insurance fraud schemes, and slow marination of Ethan's finances into her control. She held nothing back, so thoroughly convinced of her complete triumph over our pitiful family. "I've been drip-feeding that simple-minded oaf his own cuckoldry for years now," she cackled with revolting glee. "And once I finally gain dominion over his family's assets, I'll detonate the whole truth bomb right in his stupid face, just to watch it shatter him. He'll be left with nothing, no wife, no money, no pride. Just a broken, blubbering mess for me to grind my heels on one final time before exiting stage left as the big winner." As her malicious victory lap reached its crescendo of depravity, I heard a sudden clatter from the other room as Lena lost her composure, shoulders heaving with rage and heartbreak, even through her acting talents. The counterfeit empress clasped her hands in triumph, savoring every last shred of her perceived conquest with sadistic glee. Her very presence was a cancer metastasizing throughout my entire family. But now, we finally had every last diseased cell captured and ready for the eternal quarantine it so richly deserved. With Clara's damning confession secured, the final phase of our intricate sting was deployed. We arranged for a family gathering under the premise of Ethan's birthday celebration, one final ode to normalcy before ripping the veil away. As the hours ticked closer, my nerves reached a fever pitch, knowing this intersection could shatter relationships beyond repair. But Clara's overwhelming malice overshadowed any fear. She needed to be exposed, no matter how much anguish it caused. Evil this deeply rooted could not be allowed to fester any longer within our family. Seeing Ethan's bright smile as he embraced his venomous wife made me physically ill. How could he remain so blindingly oblivious to the viper coiled in his midst? It took everything I had to play the role of doting mother, feigning joy as gifts were exchanged and celebrations commenced. When the moment finally came, I exchanged a subtle nod with Derek and Lena. They moved to seal the exits as I stood, clearing my throat to gather the room's attention. Even Clara tilted her head inquisitively, that plastic smile straining at the corners as if she could somehow sense the trap about to spring shut. "Before we continue with the festivities, there's an important matter we need to discuss," I began, unable to mask the tremor in my voice any longer. "Something that can no longer be avoided or swept under the rug." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as all eyes turned towards me, Ethan's expression becoming one of sudden concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" Through the swell of nausea, I focused every ounce of resolve on the woman beside him, the soulless, depraved harpy masquerading as his beloved wife. Clara tilted her head in faux curiosity, but I could see the faintest flicker of panic in those beady little eyes as their inevitability sank in. "No, Ethan, everything is not okay," I stated with cold finality. "For years now, your family has been suffering an infestation of lies and betrayal, and it's time that cancer was cut out for good." A hush draped over the room like a suffocating blanket as the implications slowly dawned on Clara. I caught Derek inching forward from the corner of my vision, boxing in his prey. "You see, your dear wife here hasn't been quite the faithful partner she's made herself out to be. In fact, that woman is nothing more than a manipulative liar and an accomplished con artist, one who's been actively cheating and orchestrating your personal, emotional, and financial ruin." The explosion was immediate, Clara bolting out of her chair with a strangled shriek of indignation. "How dare you make such vile, outrageous accusations?" she spat with turbocharged venom, whirling on my son. Ethan, you can't possibly believe a word from these deranged liars. They're just bitter, jealous old harpies who can't stand to see us happy. But Ethan simply stared back in mute horror, his world crumbling beneath the weight of her visceral panic. When no denial or defense came from him, the terror in Clara's eyes reached a crescendo. Seizing the moment, Derek and Lena moved in with the laptop containing her recorded confessions, allowing the raw audio to blast through the room in high-definition clarity. Every despicable admission, every scheme to financially eviscerate Ethan and destroy this family's legacy poured forth in Clara's own gleefully narrated voice. As the look of realization congealed on my son's face, she switched tactics with desperate, grasping sobs. "Ethan, my love, you know I was just venting. Talking tough to make myself feel powerful in the face of adversity. You understand, don't you?" But even through her crocodile tears, the monster's fangs dripped with poison. With a contemptuous scoff, she redoubled her efforts at manipulation through attack. "This is all just one big, pathetic setup orchestrated by your shriveled old mother to turn you against me. She's bitter and alone, so she wants us to be as miserable as her, and—" The deafening crack of Ethan's palm across her cheek mercifully cut off her bile, leaving her lips sputtering and eyes bulging in shock. Clara raised a trembling hand to her reddened cheek as my son looked on her with a gaze of molten disgust. "Get out!" The words fell like grave weights from his lips. But Ethan, my love, please, you can't mean—" "I said get out!" he roared with animalistic fury. "I'm alive purely because of these people, my family. But all you've done is try to defile that family with your greed and lies. You don't belong here among us anymore. You are alone now." I watched in stunned silence, my heart in splinters, as Clara's entire world collapsed around her like a grotesque imitation of a human being. Weeping and wailing her refusals, she was pulled bodily from our home, cut loose from the family's fabric like the gangrenous growth she was. And as the door slammed behind her sorry form, I finally had a chance to breathe again. The serpent had been severed from our brood, her venom finally defanged for good. In the aftermath of Clara's cataclysmic unmasking, the silence that blanketed our home was deafening. Like the uneasy calm after a tornado's passing, we were left to take stock of the upheaval and devastation left in its wake. Ethan retreated into a shell of mute shock and betrayal, unable to even look me in the eye. I couldn't begin to fathom the vortex of emotions swirling within him. The anguish of being so systematically deceived by the person he trusted most, the humiliation of being played for a fool, the rage at her depravity. Just watching his hollow stare was like bearing witness to a light slowly snuffing out. For several days he remained that way, a ghost drifting through these halls he once called home. Derek and Lena attempted to reach out to remind him he wasn't alone in his grief and anger, but the walls he'd erected to protect what fragments remained of his heart were impenetrable. For my part, I didn't dare force consolation on him too soon. As his mother, I understood this was a wound that would need time and space to begin healing properly. So I kept vigil, lingering nearby to let him know I was present, but never imposing. Just existing as a bastion of familial solidarity should he decide to lash out or crumble completely. Then, almost a week after that explosive confrontation, the other ongoing saga decided to rear its head once more. "Mrs. Harper?" The smarmy lilt of Clara's overpriced lawyer wormed its way through the phone line. "We need to discuss your client's grievous and libelous actions against my client. She's suffered great personal and professional humiliation at the hands of your slander, and we fully intend to pursue legal recourse." I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might detach and go clattering across the kitchen floor. Even disgraced and excommunicated, that vile succubus still thought she could slither her way back through intimidation. "Save your posturing, you third-rate ambulance chaser," I sneered with more venom than I expected. "Your client is nothing more than a deceitful con artist who engaged in criminal fraud and infidelity against my family, all of which we have ample evidence to prove in court, I might add." There was a momentary pause as I allowed that truth to soak in. I could practically hear the hamster wheels spinning in the little weasel's mind. "Libel is still a very serious matter, Mrs. Harper," came the inevitable rebuttal in a tone much less assured. "My client will not take this lying down." Then I warmly encourage her to pursue this case and fulfill her martyr complex, I interrupted, balling my free hand into a fist so tight I could feel the nails cutting crescents into my palm. Because I can guarantee you the fallout of that deposition. The evidence will enter, the witness testimonies will compel, the sordid details that will be dragged out into the light of public record will reduce any remaining shreds of her credibility and reputation to ashes, unless she has a hankering for ending up completely destitute financially and socially. Whether it was the steel behind my words or the stark truth ringing in that miserable shyster's ears, the sputtering stopped abruptly. For a blessed few moments, there was only the delectable sound of their case's prospects crumbling to dust. "We'll be in touch," came the meek rejoinder before the line went dead. I let out a long, pent-up breath as the call disconnected. Just another toothless strike from a soon-to-be defunct adversary, forced to slink back into whatever rancid den she crawled out of. Still, it felt cathartic to be the one keeping the snakes at bay for once, the lioness fiercely guarding her bloodied pride's sanctuary. From the hallway behind me, I suddenly became aware of Ethan's presence hovering. Had he been there long, watching the display? I turned slowly to find him fixated on me with an indecipherable gaze. "You weren't kidding," he said, his voice sounding almost childlike with disbelief. "When you said she was toxic and manipulative, when you vowed to cut that cord completely, you meant every single word." I opened my mouth to reply, but the words never came. Seeing the rawness carving canyons across his face, my throat grew inexplicably tight. Before I could regain my bearings, Ethan had crossed the distance between us and pulled me into a stranglingly fierce embrace. "Thank you," he rasped, as I felt hot tears spilling down the back of my neck. "Thank you for not giving up on me, on us. You never stopped fighting for this family, and I'll never forget that as long as I live." Heaving sobs racked my own body as I hugged him back with equal desperation, my lips murmuring every soothing reassurance a mother could muster between gasps for air. United in our grief and deliverance, the broken shards of our trust began reshaping into something resilient, something resolved to never be betrayed again. We would savor this moment for however long it was needed to be fully bathed in the absence of Clara's venom. Then, when the last drops were expelled, we could finally begin putting the pieces of our lives back together. The weeks following Clara's excision from our family were a hectic whirlwind. Between fielding the occasional toothless legal threat and orchestrating Ethan's divorce proceedings, there was little respite from the lingering drama she insisted on fomenting. But with Derek and Lena steadfastly by my side, we weathered each pathetic gambit and postured maneuver from that miserable snake, united as a bastion against her final, desperate tantrum throes. Through it all, I made a concerted effort to keep extending the same patience and understanding to Ethan that he had afforded me in the aftermath of my beloved Teddy's passing all those years ago. The grieving process after being so insidiously violated can feel interminable, the wounds reopening with every triggered memory or habitual reminder. There were times the waves of anger, sorrow, and sheer disillusionment threatened to drown him completely. I'd find him sitting in the dark, clutching old photographs or staring blankly ahead as the reality of his defilement washed over him anew. In those fragile moments, I'd simply hold his hand and softly reassure him it was okay to feel utterly destroyed for a while. No words could anesthetize the all-consuming anguish. It had to be fully experienced, cauterized with time until the flames of betrayal burned down to embers. I'd been through similar depths before in the wake of Teddy's death, and could impart that hard-earned wisdom. It was the only torch to light Ethan's path back from the abyss. As the proceedings wrapped up and Clara was expunged from his life for good, I could sense my son's scarred spirit beginning to slowly mend. The once hollow gaze regained tiny flickers of life and resilience. Each day saw him engage more fully with the world, rediscovering those simple joys and passions that she had systematically leached away. It wasn't an easy journey by any stretch, and there were certainly setbacks and backslides along the way. Forgiveness would prove the longest hurdle, both for Clara's unforgivable sins and his own self-pardoning for being so blasely blind to them. But we pressed on as a united front, applying familial love and understanding as healing salves whenever the old wounds began to fester. Then, a little over a year after that awful night of deliverance, I caught a glimpse of the light finally piercing through the storm clouds. Derek, Lena, and I had come over to Ethan's place for a small family dinner, our presence no longer stiflingly overbearing. As we sat around the table chatting over heaping plates, my son suddenly raised his glass in our direction. Can I just take a moment to propose a toast?" His voice sounded stronger, more assured than it had in months. "To the 3 people who saved my life in more ways than I can properly articulate." He turned to Derek first, offering a respectful nod. "You were the strategist, the voice of cold, pragmatic reason when my whole world was crumbling. If not for your insights and careful planning, I might still be trapped under that vile woman's control, wasting away in oblivion." Derek accepted the praise with a humble dip of his head. Ethan's gaze then fell on Lena, shining with unmistakable reverence. "You were our secret weapon, the warrior princess who stared true evil right in the face without flinching. I'll never forget your bravery, your commitment to defending me, defending all of us, from that. He trailed off with a pained look before recovering, his features hardening. "That a succubus like Clara was even allowed to smear her darkness across our family is a sin I'll spend lifetimes atoning for. But you were the light that cut through and banished her for good." Lena flushed under the weight of such admiration, flashing a reassuring smile. Finally, Ethan's eyes found their way to me, shimmering with a soulful depth that instantly reopened the cracks in my heart all over again. "And Mom, what can I possibly say to the one person who never stopped believing I was worth saving, even when the evil had corroded me down to my foundations?" I felt my throat grow thick as he reached across the table to grasp my hands in his calloused grip. "You fought for me, you clawed me back from the abyss of her manipulations with every last ounce of motherly fury. When everyone else had been so utterly deceived, you alone could still see my essence worth cherishing underneath all the toxicity. I'll never be able to properly repay that unwavering love and perseverance." Tears streamed freely down both our cheeks as mother and son embraced, allowing the roiling tsunami of love and regret, of deliverance and resilience, to crash over us in waves once more. In that moment, the last vestiges of Clara's blight were finally washed away by the restorative power of family. When we eventually pulled apart with weary smiles, I could see the man I had fought so fiercely to protect, shining through my son's eyes once more. Hardened by betrayal yet edified in spirit, ready to joyfully rejoin the world and have a fresh reckoning for the depravities lurking amidst the light. As the conversation resumed with laughter and fresh resilience, I caught Ethan watching me with a contented expression. A lifetime of adoration and hard-won wisdom passed between our shared gaze, the reconnected heartbeat of this clan united against any evil that dared to encroach. We were battered, slightly broken, but burning ever brighter, thanks to the cauterizing flames of last year's purgative inferno. Our family's sanctity had been violated in the worst way, but in the end, the sanctity emerged stronger through trial by fire. There was beauty in that resilience, that unyielding defiance against the darkness. And with it came a resolute sense of purpose moving forward, to fiercely protect the bonds of this family, this home, from ever being tainted or torn asunder again. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Owen's phone, the bright screen searing the horrific truth into my mind. The messages were unmistakable, sweet nothings and explicit details that could only be meant for one person, his lover. "Hey babe, can't wait to take you out tonight. I've got a surprise planned." I felt the blood drain from my face as reality crashed down upon me. My husband, my partner of 12 years, was having an affair. The phone slipped from my trembling hands as a tidal wave of emotions threatened to drown me. Shock, anger, devastation. I'm not sure how long I sat there, numb and motionless, before the sound of Nathan's laughter from the backyard jarred me back to the present. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I willed my racing thoughts into focus. I couldn't confront Owen, not yet. This required a more calculated response. Retrieving his phone, I quickly deleted the damning thread, removing any trace of my discovery. No, Owen would not get off that easily. If he thought he could betray me and simply walk away, he was gravely mistaken. My mind whirred as the initial panic gave way to cold determination. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed evidence, concrete proof to dismantle every lie he would inevitably try to spin. Second, I required a plan to secure mine and Nathan's future, protecting us from the fallout of his reprehensible actions. I dialed the only person I could trust with such a weight. Ella? It's me. We need to talk. By the time Owen returned home that evening, my game face was firmly in place. I smiled and played the doting wife, all while mentally cataloging his every move, his every casual lie. He would soon learn that betrayal came at a cost, and I intended to make him pay dearly. Over the next few days, I kept my ears priced for any information that could aid my cause, maintaining a cool front despite the storm of fury raging within. Scouring his emails, texts, and any other electronic trails, I slowly pieced together the sordid details of his affair, my hatred for this Jenna intensifying with every revelation. I also began meticulously documenting his indiscretions, ensuring I left no stone unturned. Legal counsel, separate bank accounts, updated beneficiaries, no precaution was too small in securing a future for Nathan and myself, free from Owen's corrosive influence. With Ella's assistance, I bided my time, allowing Owen to slip further into the web of his own lies as his actions grew more brazen. All the while, I steadily constructed an impenetrable case against him, turning his selfish misdeeds against him. One way or another, he would atone for his sins. Soon, the veil of deceit would be lifted, and only then would Owen comprehend the true consequences of betraying the person who knew him best. The day of reckoning was coming, and I would be ready. Over the next few weeks, I worked methodically to reshape our routines, gradually removing any ties that could impede a clean break from Owen. Little by little, I redirected finances into a secure account, paid down joint debts, and revised legal documents. I even switched Nathan to a new school, one closer to Ella's house, just in case. Owen, the oblivious fool, remained utterly clueless to the approaching storm. His arrogance left an increasingly blatant trail of evidence. Received gifts inexplicably appearing around the house, furtive phone calls at all hours, shady rendezvous disguised as working late. I diligently catalogued every infraction, every despicable transgression. One afternoon, I caught him in the act, hunched over his laptop, having what he thought was a private video call. "You'll never guess what I have planned for this weekend, baby." He purred in that sickly sweet tone that made my skin crawl. "A cozy little bed and breakfast up in the mountains, just you and me." I pressed record on my phone, allowing his tawdry words to permanently etch his deceit before clearing my throat loudly. Owen startled, panic flashing across his face as he scrambled to minimize the window. Too late, I had bore witness to the truth yet again. "Oh, hey, hon." He feigned an innocent smile. "Just a work call. You know how it is." Rather than confront his pathetic lie, I simply quirked an eyebrow and strolled away, anger simmering beneath my calm veneer. Let him leave the increasingly transparent trail. It would only further damn him when I deployed my reckoning. A new fire lit within me as I doubled down on my efforts. I knew the law would side with the wronged spouse, especially with the cache of evidence I had diligently compiled, but it never hurt to stock more ammunition. With Ella's help, I left no stone unturned, drilling into Owen's email accounts, financial records, anywhere even the faintest trace of impropriety may lurk. And lurk it did. Jenna's name appeared again and again, a scarlet A woven through loan applications, withdrawals, even several Negley employees' reports that Ella managed to unearth. Piece by piece, I unraveled the tapestry of lies he so carefully attempted to shroud, revealing their affair for the umbrella of selfish deception it truly was. Meanwhile, Owen's behavior at home grew more erratic, more careless. Perhaps sensing the calm before the storm, he seemed determined to cram in as much debauchery as possible. I lost count of the evenings he stumbled in late, reeking of that trashy perfume, or the hushed phone calls held in parked cars. It was almost insultingly blatant. Through it all, I maintained a veneer of plausible deniability, tenderly caring for Nathan while shrouding my intentions behind a facade of wifely naivety. Let Owen openly frolic with his mistress. It would only make the sting of his consequence more brutal and well-deserved. Part of me couldn't wait to obliterate the life he thought he knew, to crush every bit of shameless arrogance that allowed him to so brazenly spit in the face of our vows. Soon the predator would become the prey, his infidelity dissected and upended for all to see the ugly, selfish core lurking underneath. I knew the road ahead would be painful, that curveballs and complications surely loomed just out of sight. But I refused to go down as the meek, jilted wife weeping from the sidelines. No, Owen's betrayal required a firmer hand, and I would be the one to deliver his penance with surgical, unwavering precision. Licking my wounds in private, I steadied my nerves and hardened my resolve. Judgment awaited, and I would be its ultimate arbiter. As the weeks ticked by, more layers of Owen's deception began to unspool. Diving into our financial records, I discovered he had been steadily siphoning funds from our joint accounts into a separate, hidden stash. Thousands of dollars, drained to bankroll his escapes with that vile woman. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. Not only was he betraying my trust in the most unconscionable way, but he was robbing from our family's future, from Nathan's potential inheritance, to fund his deplorable indulgences. I felt utterly violated. Thankfully, I had kept meticulous documentation of every fishy transaction, every bit of evidence that could be leveraged against him. With Ella's guidance, I began quietly setting up my own off-the-books account, diverting what I could salvage to ensure a stable financial future for Nathan and myself, independent of Owen's selfishness. Ironic, I thought bitterly, that he would inadvertently teach me such an invaluable lesson about contingency planning. As if his monetary depravity despicable enough, I soon uncovered an even more gut-wrenching layer of Owen's betrayal. Amidst my impassive surveillance of his communications, I came across a galling string of messages between him and Jenna, each more repulsive than the last. "You know this can't go on forever, right?" Her artificially sweet words practically oozed through the screen. "If you ever want us to have a real future, you need to do the right thing and leave that family of yours behind." My heart plummeted into my stomach as I absorbed the full extent of her arrogant, cold-blooded manipulation. So that was her insidious game. She hadn't just set her predatory sights on snagging Owen for a fleeting dalliance, but had been systematically working to obliterate our entire lives. The worst part was, his responses seemed to be tacitly encouraging her suggestions. In that moment, I was gripped by an overwhelming protectiveness over Nathan. I refused to allow that shriveled snake of a woman to slither her way into destroying the sanctity of his childhood, of the life and values I had so lovingly nurtured. If she wanted a battle, she had just initiated a war she could never hope to win. I redoubled my efforts, drilling down on every last intersection of their sordid involvement. Deleted messages, calendar invites, receipts, all betraying a torrid breadcrumb trail deliberately hidden in plain sight, as though Owen reveled in parading his indiscretions behind my back. With Ella's assistance, I began compiling it all into an ironclad damning dossier, one that would ensure I emerged victorious. Meanwhile, as Owen's duplicity intensified, so did my efforts to lovingly insulate Nathan from the turmoil lurking under our roof. We spent quality time together each day, baking, doing arts and crafts, lavishing in the simplicities of the mother-son bond. Deep down, I drew strength from his innocence, from the bright future I was determined to preserve on his behalf. "Mom, can we go camping this summer?" Nathan asked one afternoon, all smiles and unbridled hope. "You, me and Dad?" My heart clenched at the thought of Owen tainting such a special tradition with his perverse dishonesty. Forcing a reassuring smile, I pulled my sweet boy close. "Of course we can, baby," I murmured into his hair. "Maybe somewhere extra special, just you and me." Owen couldn't be allowed to tarnish Nathan's horizons any longer. As his transgressions piled up, so did the fortifications around the family he had shattered beyond repair. Guided by Ella's pragmatism and my own unflappable discipline, I arised the art of sustainable vengeance, quietly assembling the battle plan that would neutralize every last threat he posed. Our future security was nearing weight off the deceptive life he had so recklessly constructed. Once the dust settled, Nathan and I would emerge vibrant and victorious, utterly insulated from the toxicity of Owen's rebounding misery. Soon, all would be laid bare, and that wretched mistress of his would learn the steep price for ruining the sanctity of my family. With my defenses solidifying, it was time to take the offensive. I knew divorce proceedings would be inevitable, so I began consulting with a ferocious bulldog of a lawyer that Ella recommended. Sitting across from her imposing desk, I methodically laid out the comprehensive paper trail, documenting every last one of Owen's indiscretions. I want to pursue an at-fault divorce on grounds of adultery, I stated flatly. He needs to be held fully accountable. The lawyer's eyes widened as she examined the mountain of evidence, hard numbers, screenshots, incriminating images. Finally, she let out a low whistle of impressed disbelief. With a case file like this, he won't know what hit him, she stated grimly. We'll bleed him dry. Her cold calculation was strangely reassuring. For too long, I had been at the mercy of Owen's betrayal. Now I would be the one dictating his misery. Meanwhile, Ella had been working her own angles to demolish the worm's life on a professional level. Through her investigative prowess, she uncovered an insidious pattern surrounding his mistress, a systematic seduction of married colleagues from the bottom rungs all the way to upper management. Jenna wasn't just a callous homewrecker, she was a calculating workplace huntress. Armed with undeniable proof of her penchant for unscrupulous affairs, Ella began feeding anonymous tips to her employer's human resources department. Suddenly, the veneer of professionalism that Jenna had so carefully maintained began to disintegrate before her. I could only imagine the fear that started lacing Owen's messages to his mistress as gathering storm clouds of scrutiny began closing in on their indiscretion. Would he finally start to feel the shred of anxiety, the paralyzing uncertainty that I had been forced to endure for months? How delicious it would be to watch his world slowly implode while remaining utterly powerless to undo his own vile undoing. I refused to simply sit back and gloat, however. With the lawyer's guidance, I pressed forward in surgically separating myself from any legal or financial liability stemming from Owen's recklessness. Name was to be stripped from property titles, accounts relisted under just my name, every entanglement cauterized with precise intention. Like a gifted angler, I indelicately removed every barb and hook he had carelessly strewn across my life, one squirming tug at a time. Don't leave any strings dangling, the lawyer warned. He'll try desperately to bleed you dry as leverage, so cut off all potential sources. I just smirked back at her, utterly undaunted. That foolish man had already revealed the boundless depths of his depravity, his staggering capacity for selfishness and indulgent stupidity. Did he really think I would blink at his pathetic intimidation tactics now? Oh, how exquisite his underestimation would be. Every day, it seemed, unearthed a new layer of Owen's perfidy for me to coldly dismantle. The shady real estate holdings, mail-order dalliances, messy digital footprint, all irreversibly preserved as damning exhibits in his upcoming humiliation. With each dossier I compiled, each revelation of deceit and betrayal, my appetite for retribution grew insatiably ravenous. He simply had no idea what sort of Pyrrhic victory he had unleashed upon himself. Fool that he was, he could never fathom the depths of my capacity for determination or discipline. Where he remained pathetically encapsulated by the incessant neediness of his cowardly id, I was rapidly evolving into an unstoppable force of nature, a consummate, merciless juggernaut of wrath. I would become the arbiter through which all of his despicable transgressions would finally and irrevocably be judged. As Owen remained blessedly clueless to the swirling vortex of exposure rapidly encircling him, I continued preparing the pieces for our fateful reckoning with practiced calculation. Let him wallow obliviously in his cesspool of lust and faithlessness a while longer. The phantom freedom he was deludedly indulging would prove all the more suffocating once I fully seized the reins of his torment. His future belonged to me now, as much as he had willfully orphaned himself from mine, and the path ahead for him was looking increasingly unavoidably bleak. With each passing week, the tsunami of Owen's consequence gathered more unstoppable momentum. The HR complaints against him and his mistress had bloomed into a full-fledged corporate scandal, with whispers and dark looks trailing their every move through the office halls. "I can't believe we've been working alongside those kinds of people," I overheard a coworker mutter in hushed tones. "It's just sordid." Owen may have remained oblivious to the rapidly disintegrating ground beneath his feet, but there was no masking Jenna's increasingly frantic demeanor. I watched with perverse satisfaction as the weight of her self-inflicted ruin seemed to physically age her before my eyes. "This is spiraling out of control." Her text to Owen became increasingly shrill. "We need to get ahead of this now." "Relax, babe. It's just office gossip," he attempted to soothe her, the smug dismissiveness in his words stoking my hatred. "I'll smooth everything over. Just keep your head down." The arrogant delusion was almost pitiable. Owen remained utterly blind, like an obliviously cheery denizen wandering into the heart of a steadily encroaching minefield. Any day now, his world would detonate in an apocalyptic deluge, decades of deceit and selfishness finally withering under their own morally indefensible weight. While he buried his head in the sand, I continued systematically dismantling every last lifeline that could possibly serve to buoy his retreat. One by one, through calculated-rized planning and Ella's expert assistance, the few friends or family members who may have provided shelter from the coming storm found themselves gradually, neutrally estranged. Like a twisted, violent magic trick, I made his entire world silently dematerialize around him, all without lifting a finger towards direct confrontation. Having thoroughly excised Owen's cancerous influence from my life, I turned to focusing on preparing Nathan for the seismic shifts ahead. Though still painfully unaware of the grotesque betrayal unfolding around him, my son had become increasingly unsettled by the underlying tensions now frayed our once idyllic home life. Evening meals were spent shooting me questioning looks while his father hurriedly choked down food. Outings felt increasingly strained and awkward, like wool being pulled over our eyes. "Is everything okay with Dad?" Nathan finally asked one night as I tucked him in, his brow furrowed with childhood worry. "He seems different lately." Steadying myself, I stroked his soft cheek and offered my most reassuring smile. "Everything's just fine, baby," I soothed, surprised at my own believability. "Grown-ups go through some changes sometimes, that's all, but you'll always have me, no matter what." My son seemed to accept the placation, snuggling deeper into his blankets with a relieved nod, but his words cemented my determination to steel him for the unavoidable turbulence that loomed ahead. For too long, Owen had been eroding the steadfast center I had fought to keep our nuclear family intact and happy. It was finally time to excise that malignancy. Over the following days, I took great care to lavish Nathan with affection and quality time, striving to create joyful memories that could fortify him through the trials ahead. We went for nature walks, visited museums, rewatched all his favorite movies nestled on the couch, anything to insulate him in a warm domesticity wholly segregated from his father's self-inflicted turmoil. All the while, I could practically feel the crosshairs of impending confrontation slowly fixing themselves on Owen's oblivious form. Like the peak of a terrifying roller coaster's first dip, we were nearly suspended at the calm before the plunging maelstrom, the decisive reckoning which he had unconscionably forced to this point. I had assembled an overwhelmingly damning dossier of evidence, stripping away every layer of his depravity through documentation and cold pragmatism, restraining orders, asset protections, childcare provisions. Nothing was left unfortified for the coming siege of his unleashed mania. All that remained was to deftly lure Owen into the kill zone, then riddle him with the merciless barrage of justice he had brought up-rakening upon himself. Scattered amidst the zeal of my preparations, I caught flashes of the woman I had once been, tempted to abandon this increasingly dark path out of some withering self-preservation. But they never lasted. My identity was permanently arc-welded to this white-hot meta-wingedity and finality of purpose. There could be no equivocation. No half-measures remaining, only a sudden, blinding dawn terminating this wretched season of deception, paving the way for the hard-won renaissance awaiting for Nathan and myself. Owen's day of judgment had nearly arrived, and I was ready. With the final pieces locked into place, I summoned Owen home for our inevitable reckoning, a terse text demanding his presence. He likely assumed I wanted to rehash marriage counseling or some other fruitless attempt at reconciliation. Little did he know, I had long abandoned any notion of preserving our lawfully wedded privation. When he finally sauntered through the door, I was seated stoically in the living room, a thick manila folder containing his compendium of sins resting coolly on the coffee table before me. As instructed, Nathan was safely ensconced at Ella's for the evening. This fallout would be far too toxic for young eyes to witness. "Hey, hon, you wanted to see me?" Owen's voice held a twinge of confusion as he made his way towards me, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. With a steely glare, I slid the dossier across the table towards his approaching form. "You might want to take a look at this first." The instant his fingers opened the folder, dread instantly washed over his features, panic seizing his body. For several torturous moments, my husband rifled through the damning evidence with shaking hands, incriminating photos, blasphemous texts, philanthropist money trails. Every dirty secret, every web of adulterous malfeasance I had so meticulously compiled over these agonizing months, all finally laid bare before his ashen face. "Lila," he finally sputtered, eyes brimming with pathetic, unshed tears. "I don't know what to say." "Don't bother," I coldly interjected, unmoved by his woebegone theatrics. "Your actions have spoken volumes already. I'm done playing pretend, done swallowing the lies. Our marriage is over." The words seemed to slap him in the face, his jaw going slack with dismay. Good, let him marinate in the consequences of his selfish treachery for once. "But you can't be serious," Owen blubbered in disbelief. "After everything we've been through, we can work this out. I know we can. Just tell me what you need, Lila. I'll do anything." I gave a derisive snort at the absurdity of his blustering, utterly unmoved by his sniveling pleas. "You've already shown me exactly what you're willing to do. Lie, cheat, steal, utterly betray the very sanctity of our vows without a single shred of remorse, all to indulge your tawdry fling with that viper of a woman." My words hung heavy in the air, both of us fully aware that I was referring to his mistress, Jenna. His momentary hesitation said it all. Pathetically, his first instinct had been to attempt disassociation from her, the cowardly worm. "That's over. I swear," he backpedaled, desperation mounting. "Completely, totally finished. This was all a massive mistake. You have to know that." "A mistake?" My voice was a razor at his throat. "You don't get to play revisionist with your ugly, drawn-out patterns of infidelity and depravity, Owen. You made your bed, woven tightly with deceit and moral atrocity. Now you get to lie in it." On cue, punctuating the finality of my statement, the front door creaked open and my lawyer entered, manila folders clutched in her manicured grasp. She stalked over and deposited them squarely on the table next to the teetering stacks of Owen's documented sins. "Mr. Hendricks, I'd suggest carefully reviewing and signing where indicated," she intoned professionally. "Mrs. Hendricks has secured a very thorough judgment on your behavior." Owen gaped like a fish, frantically flipping through the sheafs of legalese as tears began to openly flow down his crumbling face. Every protection, every contingency crafted during my Praguing exit strategy now fell ruinously into place around his buckling form. It was beautiful, utterly vindicating justice. This can't be happening," he whispered numbly, Pelagian at the sheer immensity of his forfeiture. Finances, property, probably even custody if I pressed based on his philandering rap sheet. His shattered eyes finally lifted to meet my own, perhaps for the first time in years, truly seeing the remorseless diamond-plated version of the woman he had so carelessly betrayed. In that moment, I allowed every last acrid plume of rage and disgust I felt towards him to bore into his shrinking soul. "Start getting used to your new reality, Owen," I spoke softly, each word dripping avec menace. "This is the bed you've made, and I'm just getting started in returning that favor." In the days following my explosive confrontation with Owen, a strange, almost giddy calm settled over me. As I watched him desperately attempt to untangle the legal straitjacket I had so tightly bound him in, I felt utterly at peace, like a skilled surgeon having cleanly excised a malignant toxicity. "This is outrageous," he railed to my lawyer during one meeting, motioning wildly at the divorce terms. "You can't just take everything. What about my career? What am I supposed to do?" The shark-eyed attorney barely batted an eye. "Frankly, Mr. Hendricks, you should count yourself lucky you haven't been charged with criminal misconduct, given the evidence. I'd suggest complying and avoiding any unpleasant escalations." Unable to restrain my satisfaction, I allowed a faint smirk to crease my lips as the impotent bluster drained from Owen's face. I'd hand-picked this aggressive legal Rottweiler for her reputation in devouring entitled adulterers. Let him choke, on the bitter taste of his abject humiliation for once. While he flailed and floundered in a desperate bid for basic traction, I focused my energies on more positive pursuits, namely ensuring a smooth transition for Nathan. With gentle age-appropriate conversations, I steadily ushered him through the realities of our new reality, careful to insulate him from any unnecessary toxicity. "Daddy has made some grown-up mistakes," I explained carefully, cradling my son close. "Ones that mean we won't be living together as a family anymore. But you'll always have me, and I'll always keep you safe and happy. I promise." To his immense credit, Nathan seemed to accept the situation with surprising grace and resilience. Perhaps the underlying frictions in our home had been more transparent than I'd hoped. In any case, with the cancerous influence of Owen's toxicity expunged, I could already sense my son's lightening spirit, unshackled from the poisoned air he had been unwittingly inhaling for far too long. As for Owen, his pathetic attempts at reconciliation and mercy fell on deafened ears. I caught glimpses of his mewling voicemails, increasingly anguished texts pleading to meet, reeking of desperation, but I simply forwarded them to my lawyer, refusing to indulge his predictable histrionics for even a moment. He had chosen to selfishly discard any goodwill or decency between us. Now he could drown in the withering consequences. On the work front, Owen's life continued its inexorable implosion as his seamy conduct rapidly became laughingstock of the office. I almost pitied the wretch when Ella shared footage of him being perp-walked out of his workplace, cardboard box overflowing with personal items and millennial career relics clutched limply to his chest. Jenna could be seen slinking off in the background in a paroxysm of self-inflicted embarrassment. "You're finally getting what you deserve," Ella told me with a satisfied nod. "Both of you miserable snakes." I merely shrugged, suddenly self-conscious of the depth of my friend's loyalty. Truthfully, I held no grudge against Jenna anymore. Her petty, shriveled existence had already transformed into its own searing punishment, her prospects permanently cauterized by the wildfire of scandal she helped spark in her singular lust and weakness. Owen, however, he would never escape the full, crippling weight of my disdain and fury. Not until his dying day, spent groveling through the rubble of all he had destroyed through his arrogance and weakness, I would gleefully ensure it. With each passing milestone, the house transferred to my name, Owen's unceremonious loss of custody and privileges, his reputation left a smoldering crater of scandal. The vice around his flailing existence only tightened. The man I had once loved, the father of my precious child, had willfully transformed into an amoral, lust-addled parasite. This systematic unraveling was the only poetic penance he had left himself susceptible to, and I was the merciless architect and keeper of his regenerating torment. My only regret through the entire process, if you could call it that, was my failure to capture the look on Owen's face as the final divorce papers were shoved across the table for his signature. The abject, hopeless capitulation, I committed that image to memory with savage intensity, a permanent brand searing the depth of his unforgivable transgressions into my very soul. If he had any delusions of earning leniency or a shoulder to cry on, they were emphatically snuffed in that moment. I stood impassive, muscles taut and unyielding as the granite monolith I had become, unmoved by his pitiful, shuddering pleas. After all, he had made this bed, and he would lie in it forever. As the ashes of our immolated relationship cooled and scattered to the winds, I turned to embrace my radiant future with renewed determination. Nathan and I would not merely endure in the wake of Owen's ruination. We would flourish, heroically emboldened by the sheer ferocity of my love. The next chapter, wholly devoid of my cancerous husband's toxic influence, beckoned brilliantly. With the divorce finalized and Owen permanently exiled from our lives, an incredible weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe easy again, unburdened by his insidious deception and selfishness poisoning the very air around me. Gone were the furtive glances over my shoulder, the gnawing doubts needling my subconscious. The pathological menace that was my former husband had been banished. In his place, stretching out ahead of Nathan and I, shone the inviting path of a fresh start, a life finally free from that emotional malignancy. My son, in particular, seemed to blossom in the weeks after Owen's departure. With his father's erratic, deflating presence no longer clouding our home, Nathan emerged a sunny, vibrant version of himself that I had feared was being slowly smothered. He laughed more, played with an unbridled joy and innocence, and seemed to walk taller, almost as if subconsciously relieved to be rid of an unseen burden. I knew he still harbored questions, childlike confusion about the intricacies of why Dad was no longer around. But I allowed those doubts to dissipate naturally through the simple pleasures of being present as his single, doting parent. Our bond deepened in ways I hadn't realized were possible, a nearness forged through the shared triumph over adversity. In many ways, I found myself rediscovering my own identity as well, reclaiming the woman I had been before the toxicity of Owen's influence took insidious hold. Gone were the feeble insecurities he had so skillfully preyed upon, replaced by an almost feral self-reliance, an unwavering confidence in my ability to nurture and provide unaided. Of course, I would be lying if I didn't admit to still harboring a vicious streak of resentment towards my ex-husband. Try as I might, I couldn't seem to fully excise him from my thoughts, my perceptions of the world now forever being filtered through the lens of his ultimate betrayal. Mundane tasks like checking the mailbox or reviewing finances seemed to dredge up visceral flashes of that sickening sense of violation and embarrassment upon realizing the full extent of his cheating and squandering. But I refused to allow those ugly feelings to corrupt the fresh, vibrant horizons stretching out before Nathan and I. If anything, they reminded me of the revitalizing decision I had made to sever that dead weight and provided Flint's striking motivation to diligently maintain our freedom lest we stumble into a backslide. As for my actual encounters with Owen, well, they were bitterly limited to polite but emotionally distanced co-parenting obligations. I could sense his desperate yearning for any shred of warmth or nostalgic connection during the frequent custody handoffs, his eyes silently pleading for an olive branch or moment of levity he had long forfeited any right to. But I had meant what I said, that bridge had been napalmed to cinders, nothing remaining to rehabilitate. After the unspeakable transgressions and indignities he had subjected me to so callously, he would forever be immediately dead to me outside of the most rudimentary procedural dealings. No amount of sniveling or feigned remorse could ever hope to erase the scars he had inflicted. So while Owen was left to wallow in the wreckage of his selfish debauchery, a ruined career, an ostracized social life, even restraining orders keeping him at a safe distance from me and his former workplace paramour, my focus remained squarely ahead on forging the brilliant futures we had so narrowly reclaimed from his morass of lies. With Ella's support and encouragement, I slowly let down my guard, began embracing all the wonderful possibilities unfurling in this new dawn of independence. One key step was resurrecting my long-ignored graphic design passion into a full-fledged career, pooling my settlements into launching a thriving online business that allowed me the perfect work-life balance as a newly minted single mother. It was deeply validating, watching my creative hunches blossom into success while remaining ever present for Nathan's needs. Almost as if the universe itself was rewarding my perseverance and sacrifice, gently restoring the dignity that Owen had so malignantly leached away. From there, it was almost frighteningly easy to let the light back into our lives, our household brimming with renewed vitality. I founded a women's support group to empower other divorcees who had faced similar trauma. We took vacations abroad, soaking in new cultures and perspectives as antidotes to Owen's provincialism. By all metrics, we were genuinely, effervescently happy in ways that had eluded us throughout that entire dark chapter score of marital imprisonment. Looking back, it was hard to believe there had been a time when the pall of Owen's toxicity had settled so insidiously over us all. My memories of that miserably wasted purgatory already felt like dissolving fever dreams, ephemeral delusions overwhelmed and exorcised by the blinding truth that had set us free. Nathan and I had been given an almost implausible second chance at living our lives to their fullest potentials, one I vowed never to squander in exchange for mere complacency or jadedness ever again. My son would grow up seeing the true depth of a matriarch's inner steel, and the infinite power that comes from making the impossible choice to stand upright and walk towards the sun. As for Owen, well, the less said of his own diminishing existence, the better. I had moved on from that stunted, ignoble chapter, devoting what precious energy remained towards cultivating the two flames now burning bright before me. My son was my shining future, but my scorched redemption was entirely my own. "You cheated on me!" Declan's enraged words pierced the air like shrapnel, shredding the fabric of our once blissful family life. I recoiled, my mind spinning as I struggled to process the vicious accusation. "What are you talking about? I would never betray you," I cried out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Declan thrust a medical report in my face, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. "Then how do you explain this? Lila's blood type proves she can't be my daughter." My heart plummeted as I scanned the document, the stark reality of the incompatible blood types undeniable. Confusion swirled within me, kaleidoscopic shards of doubt and denial whirling in my mind. "There must be a mistake," I pleaded, grasping at any shred of rationality. "We need to get a second opinion or run more tests." "More tests?" Declan scoffed, his face twisted with contempt. "So you can fabricate more lies? I don't know what pathetic games you're playing, but I want you and that bastard child out of my house tonight." The venom in his words stung like acid, searing through the very fiber of my being. I opened my mouth to protest, but my throat constricted, robbing me of speech. How could the man I loved, the father of my child, hurl such vicious insults with such callous ease? Lila's muffled sobs drifted from her bedroom, a heartbreaking counterpoint to the maelstrom engulfing our home. Mustering every ounce of composure, I turned and went to her, cradling her tiny form as she clung to me, her tears soaking my blouse. "Mommy, why is Daddy so mad?" she whimpered, her innocent eyes brimming with fear and confusion. I stroked her hair, my own tears flowing freely now. "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's here," I whispered, the hollow reassurance tasting bitter on my tongue. The front door slammed, signaling Declan's departure. His mother, Eloise, regarded me with undisguised contempt, her judgmental stare searing into my soul. "I always knew you were trash," she spat, her words laced with venom. "God knows what other depraved secrets you're hiding." As she stormed out, I sank to the floor, cradling Lila in my arms, her tiny body racked with sobs. The walls seemed to close in around us, the once warm sanctuary of our home now a suffocating prison of shattered trust and broken dreams. That night, as I lay awake in the darkness, my mind replayed the horrors of the day in an endless, torturous loop. Declan's accusations, Eloise's scathing condemnation, they burrowed into my psyche like parasitic worms, gnawing at my sanity, my self-worth eroding with every agonizing second. Yet, amid the maelstrom of despair, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I was innocent, and no matter how insurmountable the odds, I would fight to prove it. For Lila's sake and for my own, I would not surrender to the shadows of doubt. As the first tentative rays of dawn seeped through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my resolution steeled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a hard-fought battle for truth, justice, and redemption. The next few days blurred into a waking nightmare. Declan's rage had not subsided, his accusations growing more venomous with each passing hour. Eloise fanned the flames, her hateful whispers poisoning his mind against me. "You'll never see that child again," Declan snarled, his face contorted with rage. "Not until you admit to your sordid betrayal." I pleaded, reasoned, and begged, but my words fell on deaf ears. In their eyes, I was the embodiment of sin, a deceitful serpent who had violated the sanctity of our marriage. One evening, as I was preparing Lila's dinner, Declan stormed into the kitchen, his eyes wild with fury. "Pack your things," he spat. "You and that bastard are leaving tonight." Reeling from the impact of his words, I clutched Lila protectively. "You can't do this, Declan. She's your daughter, for God's sake." His cruel laughter pierced the air, chilling me to the core. "My daughter? Don't make me laugh. That little brat is a constant reminder of your infidelity," Lila whimpered, burying her face in my embrace as Eloise glowered from the doorway. "You heard him, whore. Get out before we call the police." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I gathered our meager belongings. the weight of our shattered lives condensed into 2 battered suitcases. Lila clung to me, her tiny frame racked with sobs, her innocence shattered by the vitriol that surrounded us. As we stepped out into the night, the cold air stung my face, a harsh reminder of the cruel world that awaited us. Eloise's parting words sliced through the silence like a razor. "Don't ever show your face here again, you lying tramp." In the days that followed, we drifted from shelter to shelter, our once comfortable existence reduced to a daily struggle for survival. I reached out to Tara, my former colleague and confidant, who embraced us with open arms. "You're not alone in this, Mari," she vowed, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'll help you get back on your feet." True to her word, Tara secured us a modest apartment and arranged for me to interview at her marketing firm. As I sat across from the stern-faced interviewer, my heart raced with trepidation. "So, Mrs. Turner," he drawled, his gaze piercing, "care to explain this gap in your employment history?" I swallowed hard, bracing myself for the inevitable judgment. "My husband falsely accused me of infidelity and threw us out. I've been fighting to clear my name ever since." His eyebrows arched, and for a moment I feared the worst. But then, to my surprise, he nodded slowly. "I've seen my fair share of bitter divorces," he sighed. "Welcome to the team, Marielle. We could use a fighter like you." As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, a glimmer of hope flickered within me. Tara's unwavering support and the promise of a fresh start had reignited the flames of determination. I would not be cowed by Declan's vile accusations or the harsh realities that now defined our existence. No, this was not the end. It was merely the first salvo in a war for justice, dignity, and the reclamation of our lives. And I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and determination. Tara's steadfast friendship and the camaraderie of my new colleagues provided a much-needed anchor amidst the turbulence that had consumed my life. Yet, the shadow of Declan's accusations lingered, a constant specter that haunted my every waking moment. I knew that to reclaim my dignity and secure Lila's future, I needed more than moral support. I needed a legal strategy. "You're not alone in this fight," Tara assured me one evening over coffee. "I know someone who can help." A few days later, I found myself seated across from Vincent, a family lawyer whose reputation for tenacity preceded him. "Let's cut to the chase," he began, his gaze unwavering. "Declan's accusations are baseless, but proving paternity won't be easy." I nodded, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. "We'll need to demand a proper genetic test," Vincent continued. "And dig into Declan's background. Any skeletons in his closet could bolster your case." As the weeks progressed, I threw myself into the twin pursuits of work and legal preparations. Lila's well-being was my driving force, a beacon that guided me through the darkest moments. "Mommy, when are we going home?" she would ask, her innocent eyes brimming with confusion. "Soon, baby," I'd reassure her, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Mommy's working on it." At the office, I poured my heart into every project, determined to prove my worth and silence the whispers that still lingered. Yet, not everyone was supportive. "Heard you're quite the little homewrecker," one colleague sneered during a team meeting. "Bet you're loving all the attention, you slut." The words sliced through me like razor blades, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. As tears blurred my vision, a firm hand gripped my shoulder. "That's enough, Carl." Tara's voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Unless you want a harassment suit on your hands, I suggest you keep your vile thoughts to yourself." In that moment, I realized the true depth of Tara's loyalty, a wellspring of strength that would sustain me through the darkest valleys that lay ahead. As the weeks bled into months, Vincent's investigations began to bear fruit. Financial records, travel receipts, and witness testimonies painted a damning portrait of Declan's activities, one that suggested his accusations were merely a smokescreen for his own indiscretions. "We've got him," Vincent declared, a predatory gleam in his eye. "It's time to take the fight to Declan and bury him under the weight of his own lies." A renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. No longer was I the victim, cowering in the shadows of doubt. I was a warrior, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, a force to be reckoned with in the battle for justice and redemption. As I gazed into Lila's eyes that night, I made a silent vow. No matter the cost, No matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For her sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until the scales of justice were balanced once more. The deeper we delved into Declan's past, the more sordid revelations came to light. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case of mistaken paternity quickly spiraled into a labyrinth of lies and deceit. "Look at this," Vincent growled one evening, slamming a stack of financial records onto the table. Unexplained cash withdrawals, luxury hotel charges, the paper trail points to something much darker than a simple affair. I pored over the documents, my stomach churning with each damning entry. The man I had once loved, the father of my child, was rapidly transforming into a stranger, a devious manipulator capable of unimaginable betrayal. "We need to dig deeper," I replied, my voice steely with determination. "No stone can be left unturned." In the weeks that followed, we assembled a mosaic of evidence, a tapestry woven from surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and digital footprints. The picture that emerged was one of a man consumed by greed, lust, and an insatiable appetite for deception. "He's been playing us all for fools," Vincent seethed, his fists clenched. The blood-type discrepancy was just a convenient cover for his own sordid affairs. My mind reeled as the truth unraveled, each revelation more gut-wrenching than the last. Declan's protestations of fidelity had been a carefully constructed facade, concealing a web of lies that stretched back years. "That bastard," I hissed, my fingers digging into the armrests. "All this time, he's been the one betraying us." Yet, amidst the maelstrom of anger and disillusionment, a glimmer of hope emerged. With the truth laid bare, we possessed the ammunition to dismantle Declan's house of cards, to strip away the veneer of righteousness and expose him for the duplicitous charlatan he truly was. "We're going to bury him," Vincent vowed, a predatory gleam in his eye. "He'll wish he never crossed paths with us." As the days ticked by, our case grew stronger, bolstered by irrefutable evidence and sworn testimonies. Declan's web of lies was unraveling, strand by damning strand, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. One evening, as I tucked Lila into bed, her innocent eyes brimmed with curiosity. "Mommy, why are you and Daddy fighting?" I swallowed hard, struggling to find the words to explain the betrayal that had shattered our lives. "Daddy did some very bad things," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But don't worry, sweetie, Mommy's going to make things right." Her small hand caressed my cheek, her touch a balm for the rawness that still lingered. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered, her voice laced with a wisdom far beyond her years. In that moment, I knew that no matter the obstacles, no matter the sacrifices, I would emerge victorious. For Lila's sake, and for the sake of every woman who had been wronged by the cruelty of men, I would not rest until justice was served. As I rose from her bedside, a renewed sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The time for tears and self-pity was over. Now was the moment to strike, to unleash the full force of our righteous fury upon the man who had so callously shattered our lives. Declan's reign of deception was nearing its end, and I would be the one to deliver the final devastating blow that would bring him to his knees. Justice, long denied, would finally be served. The weight of the evidence against Declan was staggering, a damning mosaic of lies and infidelity that threatened to unravel the very foundation of his carefully constructed charade. Yet, as the day of reckoning approached, a sense of trepidation gnawed at the edges of my resolve. "He's not going to go down without a fight," Vincent warned, his brow furrowed with concern. "Declan's got deep pockets and a nasty vindictive streak. Brace yourself for an all-out assault." His words proved prophetic. In the days leading up to the hearing, a torrent of allegations and character assassinations flooded the media, each more vicious than the last. Sources close to the family described Marielle Turner as an unfit mother with a history of promiscuity and substance abuse. One lurid headline screamed. I recoiled in disgust, my hands trembling, as I read the litany of falsehoods and half-truths that had been woven into a nightmarish tapestry of lies. "Don't let it get to you," Tara urged, her voice a steadying force amidst the storm. "They're just trying to rattle you." Yet, as the days ticked by, the onslaught intensified, each salvo more devastating than the last. Strangers would hurl insults as I passed on the street, their words cutting deeper than any knife. "Whore! Baby killer! Declan was too good for trash like you. The venom seeped into my pores, poisoning my mind with doubt and self-loathing. There were moments when the thought of surrender, of simply retreating into the shadows and letting Declan claim his hollow victory, seemed like a merciful release. But then, I would look into Lila's eyes, those pools of innocence that had been forever tainted by the cruelty of the world, and my resolve would harden once more. I won't let him win, baby, cradling her against me. Mommy's going to make everything right again. The night before the hearing, as I lay awake in the silence of our modest apartment, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was more than just a battle for custody or vindication. It was a war, a clash of ideologies that would reverberate far beyond the confines of our fractured lives. Declan embodied the worst aspects of patriarchal arrogance, the belief that wealth and status granted him the right to lie, cheat, and discard those who dared to challenge his authority. His actions were a poisonous manifestation of the toxic masculinity that had subjugated women for centuries, reducing us to mere chattels to be used and discarded at a man's whim. But I was the embodiment of a new order, a defiant spirit that refused to be cowed or silenced. In that moment, I understood that my battle transcended the personal. It was a clarion call for every woman who had been wronged, a beacon of hope that justice could prevail even in the darkest of times. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I rose from the bed, my eyes burning with resolve. The time for doubt and self-pity was over. The hour of reckoning had arrived. With Lila's hand clasped tightly in mine, I stepped out into the world, ready to face the storm that awaited us. Declan's reign of terror was about to end, and I would be the one to deliver the killing blow that would topple his empire of lies. This was more than just a courtroom battle. It was a war for the very soul of our society, a fight to exorcise the demons of misogyny and oppression that had festered for far too long. And I, armed with the truth and fueled by a mother's love, would be the avenging angel that rained judgment upon those who dared to subjugate and abuse. The time for justice had come, and I would not rest until the scales were balanced once more. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, each side bristling with barely contained hostility. Declan, impeccably groomed and flanked by his high-priced legal team, glowered at me from across the aisle, his eyes burning with contempt. As the proceedings commenced, his lawyers launched into a blistering assault, painting me as a morally bankrupt adulteress unfit for motherhood. Their words lashed like whips, each allegation more sordid than the last. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming," the lead counsel sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Mrs. Turner's promiscuity and utter disregard for the sanctity of marriage have irreparably damaged this family." I steeled myself, my fingers digging into the armrests as a tidal wave of rage threatened to consume me. But then Vincent rose to his feet, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "Your Honor, the defense's claims are nothing more than a smokescreen, a desperate attempt to conceal the truth about Mr. Turner's own egregious transgressions." With a deft flick of his wrist, he produced a sheaf of documents, slamming them onto the evidence table with a resounding thud. Financial records, travel receipts, surveillance footage, all pointing to a sordid web of infidelity and deceit that stretches back years. A hush fell over the courtroom as the damning evidence was presented, each piece fitting together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle. Declan's face drained of color, his carefully cultivated veneer of respectability crumbling with each revelation. "You lying sack of filth," I hissed, my voice trembling with fury. "All this time, you've been the one cheating. The blood type was just a convenient excuse to cover your own tracks." Declan recoiled as if struck, his eyes darting frantically from face to face, searching for an ally in the sea of condemnation that surrounded him. I can explain," he sputtered, his composure cracking under the weight of the evidence. "Save your pathetic excuses," Vincent snarled, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The truth is laid bare for all to see. You're nothing but a spineless coward who hid behind false accusations to mask your own sins." As the revelations continued to unfold, each more damning than the last, the courtroom descended into pandemonium. Eloise, her face contorted in a rictus of disbelief and horror, turned on her son with a fury that would have cowed lesser men. "How could you?" she raged, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You've disgraced our family, brought shame upon us all with your lies and debauchery." Declan shrank back, his bravado evaporating in the face of his mother's wrath. In that moment, he was no longer the swaggering titan who had so callously shattered our lives. He was a small, pitiful creature, exposed and vulnerable to the judgment of his peers. As the gavel thundered, restoring order to the courtroom, a hush fell over the proceedings. All eyes turned towards the judge, whose weathered face betrayed a lifetime of bearing witness to the depths of human depravity. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented," he intoned, his voice grave, "I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mrs. Turner. Full custody of the child, as well as a substantial settlement, will be awarded forthwith." A weight lifted from my shoulders, a burden that had pressed down upon me for far too long. As Declan was led away, his head bowed in shame, I turned to face the woman who had once been my mother-in-law. Eloise regarded me with a mixture of contrition and begrudging respect, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was wrong about you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." In that moment, I felt a pang of pity for the broken woman before me, a victim of her own toxic loyalty, blinded by her adoration for a son who had proven himself unworthy of such devotion. Extending my hand, I met her gaze with a steely resolve that brooked no argument. "Let's put the past behind us," I replied, my voice unwavering, "for Leela's sake." As our fingers intertwined, a bridge across the chasm of pain and betrayal, I knew that a new chapter was beginning. One forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But I would be ready, a warrior armed with the truth and fueled by an unquenchable thirst for justice. No longer would I cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, I would stand tall and defiant, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, a living embodiment of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and I had emerged victorious, battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. In the aftermath of the courtroom battle, a surreal calm settled over our lives. Declan, disgraced and humiliated, had retreated into the shadows, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere specter haunting the fringes of our existence. The financial settlement, though substantial, felt like a hollow victory, a paltry compensation for the anguish and betrayal we had endured. Yet, as the dust settled and the harsh glare of public scrutiny faded, a new reality began to take shape. Eloise, her carefully constructed worldview shattered by the revelations of her son's duplicity, found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Gone was the imperious matriarch who had once so vehemently condemned me. In her place stood a shell of a woman, haunted by the ghosts of her own misjudgments. "I owe you an apology," she murmured one afternoon as we sat across from each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I regarded her with a guarded expression, the wounds of her past transgressions still raw and throbbing. "For too long, I allowed my own prejudices to blind me to the truth," she continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I failed you, and more importantly, I failed Lila." A part of me yearned to unleash the torrent of pent-up fury that had festered for so long, to lash out and inflict upon her a fraction of the pain she had so callously inflicted upon us. But as I gazed into her haunted eyes, I saw not the imperious shrew who had once reveled in our suffering, but a broken woman, a victim of her own misguided loyalties and toxic ideologies. In that moment, a profound truth crystallized within me. Harboring hatred and resentment would only perpetuate the cycle of pain and oppression that had nearly destroyed us. "We've all made mistakes," I replied, my voice measured and even. "What matters now is how we move forward, as a family, for Lila's sake." Eloise's shoulders sagged, a tremulous sigh escaping her lips as a flicker of relief passed across her features. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've shown more grace and compassion than I ever deserved." As the weeks bled into months, a fragile truce took root between us. The path towards true reconciliation would be long and arduous, paved with the shattered remnants of our fractured trust. Yet, for Lila's sake, we persevered. Two warriors, battle-scarred and weary, united by a shared commitment to forge a better future for the innocent caught in the crossfire of our conflict. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to crumble, and glimmers of the family we had once been started to emerge from the rubble of our shattered lives. Lila, ever resilient, took the first steps towards healing the breach, her boundless love and infectious laughter serving as a balm for the wounds that still lingered. "Grandma, come play with us," she would call out, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. And Eloise, her defenses worn down by the relentless onslaught of childish innocence, would inevitably acquiesce, setting aside her trepidation and embracing the moment with a cautious tenderness. In those stolen moments, I caught fleeting glimpses of the woman she might have been. A loving matriarch, untainted by the corrosive influence of prejudice and toxic masculinity. As for Declan, his presence lingered like a malignant shadow, a constant reminder of the depths of betrayal we had endured. Yet with each passing day, his hold over us weakened, his once formidable aura of invincibility eroded by the unstoppable march of time and truth. We were survivors, battle-hardened and emboldened by the fires of adversity. The chains of oppression that had once bound us lay shattered at our feet, the shackles of fear and self-doubt cast aside in favor of a newfound strength and resilience. And as I gazed out upon the world that had once seemed so hostile and unforgiving, I felt a surge of hope swell within me, a beacon of promise that illuminated the path ahead. The war had been won, but the battle for true equality and justice was far from over. There would be other Declans, other malignant forces bent on subjugating and oppressing those they deemed inferior. But we would be ready, a united front forged in the crucible of suffering and tempered by the indomitable strength of a mother's love. No longer would we cower in the shadows, cowering from the stinging lash of misogyny and cruelty. No, from this day forward, we would stand tall and defiant, beacons of hope for all those who had been wronged. Living embodiments of the indomitable spirit that refused to be broken. The reckoning had come, and we had emerged victorious. Battered, perhaps, but unbroken and emboldened for the battles yet to come. The weight of the past year's tumultuous events seemed to dissipate as I stepped across the threshold of our new home, a cozy two-story nestled in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. This was more than just a fresh start. It was a physical embodiment of the hard-won victories that had carried us to this point. "What do you think, baby?" I asked, turning to Lila with a warm smile. Her eyes danced with unbridled delight as she took in the spacious surroundings, her tiny feet pattering across the hardwood floors. "I love it, Mommy," she exclaimed, twirling in a whirlwind of giddy excitement. Watching her, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude wash over me. This was the life she deserved. A sanctuary untainted by the specter of Declan's betrayal, a place where she could blossom and thrive without the weight of our past struggles bearing down upon her. "I'm glad you approve," I chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. As the days melted into weeks, our new abode began to take on the warmth and character of a true home. Lila's vibrant artwork adorned the walls, splashes of color and whimsy that seemed to radiate a childlike joy. Yet, amidst the trappings of our fresh start, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of melancholy. The road that had led us here had been paved with pain and heartache, a crucible of suffering that had forged us into the warriors we had become. "You've come a long way, Mari," Tara murmured one evening as we sipped wine on the back patio, basking in the golden glow of the setting sun. I nodded, my gaze drifting to the horizon as memories of our shared struggles played out like a bittersweet symphony. "There were times when I didn't think I'd make it," I admitted, my voice tinged with a hard-won wisdom. "But you were there, every step of the way. I can never repay you for that." Tara's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and affection as she reached across the table, her hand enveloping mine in a warm, reassuring embrace. "You don't have to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Seeing you rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever, that's all the reward I could ever want." As the weeks bled into months, I found myself rediscovering the passions and ambitions that had once defined me. With Lila's future secured and the specter of Declan's betrayal fading into a distant memory, I turned my sights towards the next chapter of my life. The marketing firm welcomed me back with open arms, and I threw myself into my work with a renewed vigor, channeling the hard-won lessons of my ordeal into a driving force that propelled me ever forward. "You've got fire in your belly, Turner," my boss remarked one day, a glint of admiration in his eye. "Keep this up, and you'll be running the show before you know it." As I climbed the corporate ladder, each rung a testament to my tenacity and resilience. A part of me couldn't help but revel in the delicious irony of it all. The very traits that Declan had sought to crush and subjugate, my strength, my independence, my unwavering spirit, were now the cornerstones of my success. Yet for all my professional triumphs, it was the quiet moments with Lila that truly brought me solace and fulfillment. Watching her blossom into a confident, vibrant young woman filled me with an indescribable sense of pride and wonder. "You're my hero, Mommy," she would whisper, her eyes brimming with adoration as she snuggled against me on the couch, our nightly ritual of story time and cuddles unfolding like a cherished tradition. In those moments, I felt a profound connection to the unbroken chain of strong, resilient women who had come before me, warriors who had fought and bled to carve out a space in a world that had sought to diminish and subjugate them. And as I gazed into Lila's innocent face, I silently vowed to honor their legacy, to be the embodiment of the unwavering spirit that refused to be cowed or broken. The years melted away, each one marked by triumphs and challenges, laughter and tears, the ebb and flow of life's rich tapestry. Yet, through it all, one constant remained, the bond between mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by an unbreakable love. As the twilight of my life began to cast its gentle glow, I found myself reflecting on the winding path that had brought me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, the hard-won battles, they had all been necessary steps on a journey that had tested the very limits of my strength and resilience. And as I looked out upon the world, I saw not just the scars of my own trials, but the countless other women who had faced their own battles, their own Declans to conquer. In that moment, I knew that my story was more than just a personal triumph. It was a rallying cry, a beacon of hope for all those who had been wronged, oppressed, and subjugated. For in the end, it was not the weight of our burdens that defined us, but the indomitable spirit that refused to be crushed beneath them. We were warriors, forged in the crucible of adversity, our scars a testament to the battles we had waged and the victories we had won. And as I took my final breath, secure in the knowledge that my legacy would live on through Lila and the generations to come, I felt a sense of profound peace wash over me. The war was won, the battles had been fought, and in the end, justice and resilience had prevailed. We were the unbroken, the unbowed, and our stories would echo through the ages as a reminder of the indomitable strength of the human spirit.